Well, and I guess my concern is that what we have here is a series of reports that Dr. Ebright has brought out, some of the questioning that I did and others did earlier. We've had a series of reports that date back a good period of time, and yet the changes haven't been made, and so it's a concern. A mistake is one thing. Having a standard operating procedure which is so flawed that you have repeated mistakes is something that I have to agree with the chairman on. That's our problem. And I agree with you, Mr. Kaufman, you don't want to punish somebody who merely makes a mistake. You want them to come forward as quickly as possible and let's fix it. But you got to stop the same mistake happening over and over again. Dr. Ebright, how do we make these reforms happen this time? How do we do that? Because while CDC has to protect the American public from anthrax and other things, our job is to do oversight and make sure that they're doing their job. So how do we make it happen?
I think the two steps that Congress and the administration could follow to reduce the probability that this happens again in CDC's own labs and in the labs that CDC and USDA regulate outside those facilities. The two most important steps are, first, to reduce the number of select agent laboratories. The number of select agent personnel, the volume of select agent research increased by a factor of 20 to 40 over the last decade. That volume of registered individuals, that volume of activity needs to be rolled back to close to the level where it was at the beginning of that increase. That would represent taking the current 1,000 or more than 1,000 select agent labs in the U.S. and reducing it to 50.
All right, now let me ask you a question real quick. High containment, select agent, are those interchangeable terms or are they different?
They're very close to interchangeable.
Okay.
Most select agent research, particularly most research of consequence, is done at biosafety level 3. Biosafety levels 3 and 4 are considered high-level containment.
So your first recommendation is let's squeeze it back down to 50 instead of 1,000 of these select agent.
Roughly, the increase was a factor of 20 to 40. I would recommend we roll back a factor of 20 to a factor of 40. 1,000 divided by 20 is 50.
Okay.
1,000 divided by 40 is 25.
All right.
So that, I believe, is the single easiest, single fastest, and certainly most economical approach.
And you
to
had a
resolve
second, because obviously
okay,
time
last
is
one
limited.
is independent entity that carries out the regulation and oversight of biosafety and biosecurity in those labs. Not an agency that performs the work, not an agency that funds the work.
Okay. Now, you've said we need to scale back, but let me ask you, why has there been an expansion, and the phrasing that I have is the high containment laboratories, you said they're close. Why has there been such a great expansion?
So it was in large measure, essentially in whole, a response to the 2001 anthrax mailings. At the time of the 2001 anthrax mailings, it was understandable because it was expected here and elsewhere that the U.S. was under attack with a biological weapon from a foreign source. It was expected that biology would be put on a mobilization footing to address this threat. We expanded by a factor of 20 to 40. Now, more than a decade later, more than a decade after it has become absolutely clear that the 2001 anthrax mailings did not come from a foreign source, and after it has become clear that the investigation believes it came from within the U.S. biodefense establishment, we have the strange situation that we have expanded that establishment by a factor of 20 to 40 without reason and without reassessment.
And the risks are self-evident? Is that
the risks follow mathematically. When you increase the number of personnel by a factor of 20 to 40, particularly when you recruit people without prior experience, new to the field, you increase risks, and you increase those risks by a factor of 20 to 40 or more.
On those points, Mr. Kaufman, are you in agreement that we need to scale it back some?
I am not. I agree with GAO. I think that it's there's not enough information to make the decision to either back off or go up. We don't have a baseline. And I also would like to say that high containment laboratories are not built, the capacity of high containment laboratories are not built for the threats we just see today. They're built for the threats that we don't see coming around the corner tomorrow.
What about, let me switch gears and go and ask about the research implications or the implications from research of re-engineering pathogens, such as the experiments by University of Wisconsin scientists that generated a virus similar to the 1918 influenza outbreak that killed tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands worldwide, and others ways to make H5N1 avian flu virus more contagious than ferrets. I mean, is this part of the expansion, or is this?
This is part of the expansion.
Right.
This is work that is funded as biodefense research, and this is a prime example of the culture of hubris. This is work that should not be performed, flat and blank, should not be performed. In those cases where elements of this work are deemed essential, when the research information could be obtained in no other way, then this work should only be performed in a very limited number of institutions, perhaps one or two nationally, and only after extensive review of risk-benefit weighing at the national level, and only under the most stringent safety and security standards.
I appreciate that very much. I appreciate both witnesses being here. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate having the hearing. I like the opportunities to learn, and I have learned a great deal from this hearing. Thank you so much.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back, and I certainly would encourage all members of this committee to go visit some of the labs around the country, particularly get to CDC headquarters and see for their own eyes how this works.